There are no rules for guns in traditional military science. Nevertheless, in view of their function as instruments of killing and wounding, samurai have no business ignoring them. Attributed to Yamamoto Kansuke, the opening quote of this video reflects on the traditional science of military warfare in feudal Japan. There was a time in history when firearms were the new weapons in Japan, and their technology and implementation on the battlefield were untested. And although gunpowder had come to Japan soon after its invention by the Chinese in the 9th century, it was not until the mid-16th century that firearms had really found their place on the battlefield. Their unparalleled power and the ability to shoot through armour and cover made them very valuable weapons indeed for generals and captains in feudal Japan. However, after the Warring States era and at the dawning of the Tokugawa period, when the emphasis was on centralising power and weakening regional warlords, guns started to be regulated. From 1607 onwards, orders for new firearms had to be put through government offices, with the intention being to restrict the ownership and production of these weapons. These new legal obstacles made it unfavourable for gunsmiths to carry on making weapons. But in order to retain this technology and ability, Tokugawa Ieyasu ordered the gunsmiths to return to work and gave them a subsidy, essentially nationalising firearms production. There was one notable exception to this rule: the city of Sakai, which had the only factory that had the legal right to manufacture firearms. However, with so many guns stockpiled and no wars left to fight, by the early 1700s an average of just a few hundred guns a year were being made for the samurai population, which was around 1 million. Firearms still needed to be produced. This is because they were still used by the samurai clans, notably to suppress the Ainu tribal rebellion in the second half of the 17th century and a peasant uprising in the 18th century. The use of these types of firearms continued well into the 1800s, and it wasn't until modern firearms started arriving in Japan that they were gradually phased out. However, it was also this point in history that saw the samurai and their ashigaru soldiers being replaced by a professional military. During the relative peace of the Tokugawa era, the samurai were not only responsible for maintaining good order in society, but they were also responsible for maintaining a militia that could be used in the event of conflict. Guns were generally bought by samurai lords and captains, emblazoned with family crests, and then distributed to the hands of both the samurai and the foot soldiers. They were used for both warfare and hunting and skill at arms demonstrations. And it is this third category that we will look at right now. Similar to modern society, military displays, parades, and demonstrations were not uncommon during the feudal era. They served several purposes. With no ongoing engagements, it gave the ashigaru militia something to train for. It demonstrated to potential insurrectionists that there was no point in trying to fight such a well-prepared military. And it also showed the civilian population who was in charge. There was also an element of pride in what they did. The ashigaru, being drawn from the general population such as merchants and farmers, were instructed in the way of the gun by the samurai landlords. These demonstrations would show just how proficient that they had become in the way of the warrior. And the samurai would be able to demonstrate to their feudal lords that they were able to respond to any military contingencies that may arise. In the modern world, however, these demonstrations serve a different purpose. It is a way of preserving and maintaining history. firearms used in these demonstrations are actually from the samurai era. Gun groups such as the Matsumoto Castle Gun Corps research and practice with these weapons regularly in order to make a direct connection to the past. This requires the study of old documents around the instruction of gunnery, known as hojutsu. And then, just like in the feudal era, once the techniques have been studied and learned, they take to the battlefield to display their skill at arms. The Matsumoto Castle Gun Corps are regularly joined by our allies from Aichi Teppotai. The Matsumoto Castle Gun Corps are also regularly joined by the Sunpu Teppotai from Shizuoka. Just as in the feudal era, our skill at arms demonstrations at Matsumoto Castle are a regular part of city life. Japan has one of the most recognisable military histories in the world. And prior to the Meiji Restoration, it also had one of the most visually distinctive militaries in the world. Being such an infinitely interesting subject, it is no surprise that many books have been written about the samurai and many documentaries have been produced. Of course, this tends to focus on the military conflicts and battles that actually happened in Japan. Information about what happened after the Warring States era, known as the Tokugawa era, is less accessible to casual historians. And this is the final reason why teams like the Matsumoto Teppotai, Aichi Teppotai, and Sunpu Teppotai continue to do what they do. They create a link to Japanese feudal history and to the many great things that the samurai have achieved.